I consider you a very good friend and always a pleasure to have on, man. And we're going to go into some pharmacology today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. We are good friends. Absolutely a pleasure for being here, and thank you again for having me on.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, man. And I love when we go back and forth. I know you've been super busy, but like let me tell you, you just made things so much simpler and easier. And it's just like one of those things where when you put it down into layman's terms, like, ah, yeah, that makes sense. Like, absolutely. Like,
Well,
durr.
I try. I try.
So why don't you tell well anybody who doesn't know who you are, why don't you go into who you are, what you do, and how you got here?
Well, I'll try to keep it short. My name Mircea Balaj. My brand, Project Mayhem. I am a sports performance coach. I deal with lifestyle clients and athletes of all calibers and categories. My job is to make athletes better and make great athletes exceptional. And I hope I do a great job of that and hope I can help as many people as I can.
You always have, man. You've always been incredible. Are
Thank
you
you.
are you ready to go to the first topic, my man?
Absolutely. Hit me.
So, everybody, you know the old adage, everyone says test is best. I actually even had a client. I had a client say, I carry my test with me and I take my TRT before the gym. And I was like, why would we do this? So everybody's under the notion that like, testosterone's gonna be the granddaddy, testosterone's gonna be the number one thing. Let's go into an alternative because, I think the number one thing that causes the most side effects is going to be testosterone to begin with. High dose testosterone, aromatization, gynecomastia, acne, all these things. Let's go into ways on how to mitigate this or your best practices for an efficient course.
Yes. Well, first off, that is an old myth, but not as old as people would think. Back in the 60s, 70s, testosterone wasn't considered to be this master drug. It was considered to be kind of like a dirty street drug. People preferred the much more elegant versions, the more primobolan, nandrolone, even things like Winstrol. They preferred more of the more sophisticated modern versions and not just straight up testosterone. So that was more of a 80s and 90s thing, went all the way up to current day. And I think people are abusing it for a few reasons. One, because it's cheap. Two, because it's accessible. And three, because it works. Nobody's denying that. It's just the baggage of side effects that higher doses of testosterone bring is yeah, it's considerable. From high blood pressure, high red blood cell count, high water retention, high estrogen. They're kind of all linked to each other. And honestly, if you have to take, five medications to be able to take 1 gram of testosterone, I think you're better off spending your efforts and finances into, taking, I don't know, 200, 250, 300 milligrams, or at least taking half of that and filling in the gap with name your compound, androlone, primabol, and masteron, whatever it is. Um, some guidelines, in my opinion, when we're talking about, every day you hear about TRT, and then TRT for somebody's 100 milligrams a week, and then for other people it's 500 milligrams is still natural. So it's kind of like it's all over the place. I would say medically, testosterone comes in 200 milligrams per milliliter vials for a reason. It's either 1 ml or 1 cc, same thing, every other week, or half a cc, half an ml once a week. 100 milligrams once a week, 200 milligrams every other week. So that's kind of like your medical TRT. And you kind of see that puts you just above the bottom of the range, kind of like in that 300, 400 range of nanograms per deciliter, bottom of the range being like 250 ish, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
I've never seen people, I mean, I've rarely seen people get more than 500 nanograms per deciliter out of that. Top of the range is usually 850 to 1200, again, depending on the country and the lab. Where I see athletes benefiting is when they go considerably above that. talking 100 to 200%, 200 to 300 milligrams per week ish. It depends. If athletes are heavier, they can maybe take more. If athletes are lighter, maybe they don't need more. Also depends on tolerance. I know people that took 750 testosterone and did not need one AI, one blood pressure med, one blood donation. And I also know people who took 250 milligrams and they needed 8x, and they needed to do blood dumps and all sorts of stuff. So it depends. But yeah, if you want to go with TRT plus, it's your TRT, that 100 milligrams bare minimum, medically prescribed by an endocrinologist. And then the plus is just more of whatever. It can be your testosterone, it can be boldenone, it can be mastron, it can be anything. So the plus means plus more of the same or different compounds. Where you draw the limit between what's an actual TRT kind of setting and what's even a low dose course, somewhere around 300, I would say, unless you're the size of, a WSM competitor, 350 pounds plus. I think 300 milligrams is enough to be your TRT. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll keep all your artificially gained muscle off of that, but it's enough to keep all your functions. You're super heavy, yeah, maybe you'll need 400, maybe five, but I have not seen one human being that would say 500 milligrams is not TRT. And I've spoken to people that were in excess of 400 pounds muscular.
Now, a lot of that aromatization, like you were talking about, a lot of side effects, I would say, isn't that linked to a lot of adipose tissue, like someone who's fatter, someone who's heavier? Aren't they going to aromatize more than someone who's, say, like maybe single digit body fat or even just in better shape overall?
Absolutely, 100%. Aromatization, the aromatase enzyme is actually produced in fat cells. So the fatter you are, the less testosterone you can use. And the leaner you are, the more testosterone you can get away with. Or in some cases, you might need to use to keep estrogen levels. Also depends
Really?
on, yes, the leaner individuals can get away with more testosterone because they have less fat cells or smaller fat cells to produce the aromatase enzyme. So that's one thing. The other thing is also, diet is a contributing factor to a smaller extent, and activity level. I tend to see on in general that people that train hard, train a lot, almost eat up the estrogen and can tolerate higher estrogen loads. I tend to see that a lot more. People who just train willy nilly or just take their basic TRT, just literally medical, they don't tolerate high estrogen that well.
How does nutrition play a role in this?
Well, definitely, the sloppier your diet is, the fatter you will get. So the more aromatase enzyme you will produce. I don't think that the whole what is it, microplastics and soy is that big of a factor in, because you'd have to eat like an exclusively soy based diet for years to actually get that much aromatization, or that much estrogen. But yeah, I think nutrition plays a role, even when it comes to, if you're getting fat, you're gonna have a bit more substrate for aromatization.
So in like a hypocaloric environment, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So now that everybody's kind of like in the great shortage of primo masteron, everyone's starting to EQ. And EQ is like
Mm.
a tried and true. EQ's been around for decades. It is cheap, it works. And let's talk about, efficient application of this. How would you utilize this? What are, some cautions behind this? And what do you see this in like a practical sense as far as designing a course?
Well, EQ or boldenone, actually, most people get this wrong. It has been created as a medical grade drug. It has been created, I believe, in 1959, and it has been sold as a medical human grade, not pharmaceutical, not veterinary grade, anabolic agent Um, in the 50s and in the 60s and 70s, I believe. Then taken off the market with the whole baseball scandal. From it was SIBA, and it was shipped to the veterinary market and renamed Equipoise, as in equestrian or horses. So it's been a horse drug. It was usually, I believe, 50 milligrams or per milliliter or per 1.5 mLs. Came in like these big dark glass ampules. The reason for that low dose is, well, nobody was trying to juice up horses, and it also kept bodybuilders from trying to get their hands on it and use it themselves. 50 milligrams, even per 1 ml, is kind of a low dose. If you're trying to get 300 milligrams, like 6 mLs is just a pain in the ass, literally. So,
Yes. Yeah, literally. Yeah, yeah.
not the best, but it is one of those rare compounds that has such a low melting point that you can get it into 3, 4, even 500 milligrams per ml concentration. I've seen those kind of solutions. Yeah, it's actually possible. Um, but given its very similar structure to testosterone, it is a direct testosterone derivative. It's basically basically dianabol with a few tweaks and made as a C17 alpha alkylating instead of a methylated version. It shares a lot of the testosterone characteristics. It does aromatize at 50% of the rate of testosterone and to a different type of estrogen, mostly. Instead of going to the classic E2, like testosterone, it goes to E1 estrone. Estrone is the dominant estrogen version in women postmenopause. E2 is the dominant version premenopause. So women have this shift from E2 to E1 during menopause. It's a perfectly, well, why I say this is because it's a functional form of estrogen. It does pretty much all the things that estrogen should do, but it it's less fun, if you will. You don't get the same feeling from it. You don't get the same
Oh.
libido from it. So you can have normal quote estrogen levels, but because it shifts from E2 to E1, even though the, let's say, levels are the same, that shift in versions can lead to people having lower libido.
Mm.
That is definitely a thing that I've noticed with people that can take um, that do take boldenone as even as a testosterone replacement, because it does convert to estrogen. It converts to a variety of DHT because it's not dihydrotestosterone; it's actually dihydroboldenone, the ever so popular DHB. So
Yes.
you
And
get
then I
some
think it was at
natural
a
one.
quarter of the rate.
Ooh, think something like 20% ish. Yeah,
Okay.
15 to 25%. Yeah, it's a very, very low rate, but still there is some conversion.
Well, twenty
Um,
percent of like 400 milligrams is 100 milligrams. It's quite a, it's hefty.
oh, well, no, yeah, no, no, it's not that's the thing. It's not from the 100 milligrams, it's 20% of the rate. So whatever conversion you get,
Oh.
yeah,
So
you
it's
see.
it's it's a fraction of a fraction.
Exactly. Whatever conversion to DHT you'd get from your testosterone, you get 20% of that number. Because that's like, oh, I can just take Boldenone and I get free DHB. Yay. But
It's a, no,
not
no, no. This is, yeah. It's a fraction of a fraction.
correct, correct. And sometimes it's not enough. That's why even sometimes if you're going to take Boldenone as a single compound TRT variety, it's sometimes the DHB conversion isn't enough to sustain sexual function as well. So you kind of have low libido and function isn't going as smoothly as it should. Kind of not the ideal scenario. But as an adjunct, because most people now use it instead of primobolan or mastron, um, it has positives and negatives. One, it does have the potential to lower estrogen. The downstream metabolite, one of its downstream metabolites is the basically blueprint for all modern day AIs. So some people produce that in higher amounts than others, so different types of metabolism. And some people are more sensitive to that metabolite's action than others. So some people might get very aggressive lowering of estrogen, while other people might get just a bit. It's again, debatable, discussable, but there's a lot of people that have said that, yeah, boldenone is a good replacement for premium ball or masteron when it comes to estrogen lowering. Um, as an anabolic, it works perfectly fine. The drawback is it does produce a lot of red blood cells. So if you're somebody who's already on the higher end of that, you might not want to mess around with boldenone, just like you might not want to mess around with anadrol.
Well, doesn't testosterone already raise blood cell count as well? And if you have high hematocrit on just testosterone, then and your not lifestyle really isn't dialed in as far as like sleep lowering red blood cell count, nutrition lowering red blood cell count, cardiovascular safe lowering red blood cell count, then inevitably then you're only doing yourself a detriment by adding this compound in on top of that. So your hematocrit needs to be like a low normal even before you even consider this.
Yes, yes, you're just doubling up on compounds that increase, hematocrit and hemoglobin and red blood cell count. And yeah, it's if you're susceptible to that, and if you don't have your lifestyle in check, as you mentioned, your nutrition, your sleep, your cardiovascular or aerobic activities, then yeah, it's definitely going to cause probably more problems than it solves.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it.
Pluses and minuses.
We've all seen the guys with the purple face in the gym.
Oh, yeah. Way
Uh,
too many of those.
and you always ask them about their diet, and it's always like Whataburger 4 times a week, at least
Yeah.
here, because Whataburger's here. And then I'm like, this makes. I had a guy come up to me, he's like, "How do I lower my blood pressure?" I'm like, "What do you eat? What do you put in your face?" let's talk about that first.
Yeah. Lay off the barbecue sauce and the, the double serving of ribs.
Dude, in Texas, it's like a thing. It's like a thing.
I
It's
I
like it's
know.
like it's like you're a little bitch if you don't eat like red meat. And I'm like, what? How does this make sense? I was like, I was like, I had a guy, I knew a guy. Oh my god, he was a multimillionaire. He was like,
Mm,
he owned an arbering business that was like outrageously successful. And this guy like did everything under the sun all year round, and he was like cherry red all the time. And but he's super great guy. Love this guy. And I just recently called a friend and he was like, "Yeah, like so and so had a fucking stroke." And I was like,
ooh.
I told my wife, and my wife was like, "Yeah, no, like I'm not surprised. Did you see him? Like, did you like, like he looked like he was about ready to pop all the time?" And I was like, "There you go, there
Yeah.
you go." Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. It gets managing your parameters for health is like number one. And if you can't manage things on health, then you really don't have any. Some people just aren't qualified to even consider these options.
yeah, absolutely.
You
I
know,
I I stand by that 110%.
especially like with the peptides coming out, like the
Yeah.
peptides and mixing backwater and the measurements. I'm like, some people just aren't qualified to do this. Like some people
Yeah.
just need to like learn math first, math and conversions first.
Yeah. Back to grade school mathematics. That's that's a must for most people.
Dude, the milligram to milliliter is like it kills me. It kills me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I face that a lot. People don't understand a milligram, a milliliter, a cc, an IU, a 3 ml syringe versus an insulin syringe. Like it's just like, yeah, this is if this is hard for you, you're
The
gonna have a
IU
bumpy
one.
ride.
The IU one. The IU one will get you.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're
No,
like, this seems like only a little. And I go, yes. That's the point.
yeah,
just
absolutely. That's
just to
that's
the
exactly
10.
that's
Just to the 10. No more.
people sometimes confuse actual insulin IUs with GH IUs. Because GH is probably
I
mixed.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, Yeah.
It's nuts. It's nuts. Do you ever think do you think the shortage will change? Like there'll be a different route people will go, or do you think things will rectify themselves?
I am pretty sure things will improve. I have some let's say news that things might improve early next year, Q1, Q2 next year. Things might improve, hopefully. The other routes have been explored to some extent with potential, very little potential. And yeah, there's some talks of people trying to make their own from scratch, but just the process is expensive to do it in, anywhere that's not China or India, and
Well,
very
India's like everybody
laborious.
was like, I'm not buying from India.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's been happening. Not the best place to do this kind of business over there. So
Yeah.
it's weird. It's weird. It's interesting, but yeah, I'm hoping that things will get back to normal sooner rather than later. The alternative options that I've heard are sketchy and limiting, let's say. So I hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And like,
No.
and now you have to be a skeptic to where if you hear something, you're like, "Ooh, dude, ooh." I don't know.
Skeptic from anything from what is in the vial to if this is going to ever end. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And the amount of guys on prep this year that had like fake, just like everything was fake was
Yeah,
nuts.
absolutely crazy. Absolutely. The amount of people that have reported bunk gear, underdosed, mislabeled is just insane.
Sorry.
No worries. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it
crazy.
is. So let's talk about that. Is like let's save people some time, energy, and money. That's for sure. And what is the most? Let's talk about efficiency.
Hmm.
What is the most efficient way to design a course that people aren't just wasting milligrams to waste milligrams?
Well, that is an interesting topic. It's a long topic. It's complex. Basically, what I would suggest in this current market is have your basic testosterone. Try to experiment with. This is one of those cases where I say like, find a dose that you can tolerate because that's relatively accessible, relatively easy to find, and a lot cheaper than the alternatives. So this is probably one of those situations where I could say people can try to experiment with higher doses of testosterone, of course, based on their needs, and et cetera, et cetera. Maybe a higher dose of testosterone, something that they can tolerate, and then, as always, needs and us. What do I need? And then go through what is available. This is one of those scenarios where what is available. People that have used Primobalin and Mastron, maybe they would be better served using a shorter course and looking at the oral versions like an Anabol or a Winstrol. People that are more on the nandrolone side, that is pretty accessible, NPP is still accessible relatively, so maybe exploit that side a lot more. Orals seem to be less affected this time, so find your testosterone dose, use, preferably wouldn't keep orals more than 8 to 12 weeks, again, depending on goal and body size. For people who need a lot of milligrams, you can tolerate red blood cells, Boldenone is an option. If you need fullness, DECA is still an option. Trenbolone is definitely one of the more aggressive compounds, but I like to reference Dave Crossland here because he has a very interesting way of doing things, and I've seen it before, but I've heard it from him first, so I'm going to reference him, where he uses more aggressive compounds in lower doses to get the same effect. So you go with hyperpotent compounds like your trenbolone, like your DHB, hyperpotent but in lower doses. So instead of taking 800 milligrams of, let's say, Mastron Primobalin, you take 200 trenbolone enanthate and 100, 200 DHB. basically having the dose and using more aggressive compounds. Saves on some actual milliliters of injection, saves on some quick bucks, and also definitely things that are maybe accessible. Now, DHP is not accessible everywhere to everyone. Blown usually is. So maybe lean on that at a lower, more responsible, if you will, dose, because it is more aggressive on health markers than most compounds. So, and also there's the idea like if you're not a competitor, if you're not in a rush to get on stage, maybe this is one of those times where it's better to take a longer bridge, a health phase, a TRT phase. And yeah, that's always an option. Less is more. Sometimes some time off is comes in the form of you need to take it because you don't have many options. And yeah, for shorter courses, orals work pretty damn well.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about this. Was like two things. This is like orals for a shorter course, let's say like an Anavar or Winstrol. Like I think that the whole liver toxicity is like a huge one, right? Or the
Hmm.
stress on the liver. And then also, like I know you mentioned DHP quite a bit, and like everybody's scared with DHP is going to be kidney toxicity, right? Is your GGT values and getting liver cirrhosis and things that you hear about DHP, and that's part of the reason like a lot of people are apprehensive about this compound, right? Let's go into depth on like some of the risks as far as like maybe running some of these different kinds of courses.
Well, for example, trenbolone risks are well known, well studied, well, from the what is it, amyloid plaque buildup on the brain, which I think is a bit exaggerated, but there are studies on it, so people think it's the biggest risk factor. I think just trenbolone is just a harsh compound on the body. It does stress pretty much everything. It is psychoactive, so it does change your mood, your sexual behavior, your aggression, every aspect. If you're anxious, it enhances your anxiety. If you're aggressive, it enhances your aggression. If you're not aggressive, it may make you aggressive. So trenbolone definitely well known, well documented, not necessarily something we want to dwell on. DHB on the other hand, not so well known, very poorly documented. A lot of people spouting nonsense about it. I have seen probably 200 or more sets of blood work, and I'm not over, I'm not giving out false numbers just to sound like I've seen more than I have, but I've seen probably 200 plus sets of blood work on DHB, and I haven't seen one of them present any signs of liver or kidney stress more than I would see with any other injectable. No liver stress, no elevated GGT, no elevated ALT or AST, no. And I've seen cystatin C on a bunch of these tests, and I haven't seen a drop in EGFR cystatin C calculated, or the EGFR based off of creatinine outside of what I would have seen with a other normal course of injectable compounds. So no, I don't think it stresses your liver or your kidneys more than masteron, primobolan, deca, testosterone, whatever. I think it is an analog of DHT, but let's call it a DHT derivative. So it is structurally closer to primobolan than I think anything else, and it acts as such. It's just a turbocharged primobolan. It enhances your libido. It enhances your strength through neurological drive like crazy. If you're somebody who kind of gets that kind of stimmed out feeling, if you're sensitive to very neurologically intense compounds, you might feel a bit overstimulated. That might manifest in anxiety, maybe. But I've heard maybe one person say like they felt overstimulated on DHB. And other than that, very anabolic, more potent than primobolan, 3, 4 folds strength gain wise, 4 or 5 fold or more. Great tool. I personally think it's one of the better tools out there. Very unknown, very unexploited and would probably serve a lot of people better than just dumping in a bunch of trenbolone in their courses.
Yeah, yeah, especially from the sleep standpoint and the anxiety and like people don't talk about the paranoia that comes to trembolone, right? Like you get paranoid and like that's
Yeah,
like the number one relationship killer, right? Is like the paranoia, not necessarily the aggression, but like always thinking your partner's cheating on you or always thinking this or always thinking that and like not recognizing that no, 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 this is a side effect and you need to
yeah.
be like very secure with your relationships and where you're at before you take this kind of responsible decision. Um, yeah, that's dude, you've like spouted off so much great information in this sense. I feel like I've just sat here quiet and just absorbed everything, and you've answered all of my questions. But where can people find you? How can they get in touch with you? And yeah, how can people really optimize the efficiency of their course with Project Mayhem?
Well, you pretty much said it. Project Mayhem on Instagram. It's at Built for Mayhem. We Our website is on the way. We're still working. We're perfectionists, so we want to have it looking perfect when we officially launch it. But until then, yes, at Built for Mayhem on Instagram. That's where you can find me. That's where you can find Project Mayhem, and hopefully you'll get some information out of this. If you want to have a consult or look into coaching, we're there. And yeah, if not, just stick around for good info, and hopefully this helps you improve your courses and your performance.
Dude, I really appreciate you taking out the time to do this. I think there's so much valuable information in this. And, I even walked away from this with like my mind blown. And I think that people will find a lot of value in this and they will end up not necessarily making bad decisions after listening to this.
Well, I definitely hope so. I hope that, especially in these murky times, people find better ways to get by without ruining their health.
Well, thank you for your time, Mircea. And I always appreciate you. And I hope we can just continue making progress together, man.
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. And thank you for having me on.
Anytime. Thank you.